This is a story of two men, both residents of San Francisco before the gold rush, both at one time among the wealthiest people in California, both dead at age 38. And yet, one was a builder and the other a scavenger. It's hard to tell one life story in the 10 minutes I have allotted, let alone two. But I'm going to devote most of my time to the builder because it takes a lot more time to build something and much less time to tear down what has been built. So let me introduce you to the builder, William Leidesdorff. William was born in 1810 in the West Indies, the bastard son of a Danish merchant and an African Carib woman. Carib is a tribe. And William was very white-skinned. In fact, he may have had blue eyes. And he passed for white in the American South for much of his life. We know little about his childhood other than he got a fine education. In fact, one source says that he was educated in England and knew 7 languages. At age 24, William went to New Orleans. Now, you gotta imagine New Orleans in 1830. It was the 4th largest port in the world. It was the 3rd largest city in the United States. The grain and goods were coming down that Mississippi River from the entire heartland of North America to the port of New Orleans. But the biggest good was King cotton. And they stacked those 500-pound bales of cotton into these ships and shipped it to England and northern United States to those textile factories. So it was into this that William started a trading company, probably with the assistance of a patron. And in 6 years, he built that company to 12 ships and many warehouses. And at age 30, he fell in love. But before the wedding, he confessed to his lover his mixed race background, and her father forbid the marriage. So heartbroken, and now his racial identity perhaps being known in the South, he sold his business and moved to New York. And his lover allegedly died of a broken heart. In New York, he bought a much bigger ship, filled it with goods, and sailed it all the way around the southern tip of South America. He was actually the captain. Around the tip of South America, up the Pacific coast, over to Hawaii, up to Alaska, and then down the Pacific coast to a tiny village on San Francisco Bay called Yerba Bueno. Excuse me. And he started a new trading business there. And it prospered, despite the fact that that area of the world was largely unpopulated. And he built other businesses. He had a ranch. He built the first hotel in what became San Francisco. And a couple years later, 2 years later, when he was 33, he petitioned the Mexican governor for a land grant, because California was under Mexican rule. And to qualify, he had to become a Mexican citizen and convert to Catholicism. So he did that. And he was granted 36,000 acres on the American River in inland California, what is now the eastern suburbs of Sacramento, Folsom, Rancho Cordova. Then in 1845, he was appointed Deputy U.S. Consul to Mexico, probably the first Black American diplomat. We don't know for sure exactly how much of his racial background was known in California, but at least one source says that it was well known. In 1846 was the Mexican-American War, and the United States occupied California. And in 1847, the Americans changed the name of the village to San Francisco and introduced American government. And Leidesdorff jumped in with both feet. He was elected to the first school board. He was elected to the first city council. He was elected the city treasurer. He donated the land for the first school in San Francisco. He started the steamboat service from San Francisco to Sacramento. He was building a sawmill on Bodega Bay. He started the first racetrack in California. He gained several large contracts with the United States Army. And it's in this same year, 1847, that we meet the scavenger, Captain William Folsom. Folsom arrived in San Francisco to fight the war, but the war was already over. So he was appointed the collector of duty for the port of San Francisco, where he would have had much dealings with Leidesdorff, who of course was the biggest trader out of that port. Well, in early 1848, rumors reached San Francisco that gold had been discovered on the American River, probably 10 or 15 miles upstream from Leidesdorff's property. And we have a letter from John Sutter, who is acknowledged as the guy who found gold in California, to Leidesdorff, under which Sutter is asking Leidesdorff to invest in his sawmill at Sutter's Mill, where the gold was discovered. Well, Leidesdorff hired an agent to go out to his property to determine, one, whether there was gold there, and two, whether there were already squatters on that property trying to get the gold. But we don't really even know what happened to the agent, because a few days later, Leidesdorff died of meningitis at age 38. And at the time of his death, he owned 360 lots in San Francisco, including many waterfronts. And he owned the 36,000 acres on the American River, which became the heart of the California gold rush. Well, Folsom, the scavenger, didn't wait long. As one writer put it, the body wasn't even cold yet when Folsom petitioned the governor to be appointed the executor of Leidesdorff's estate. Leidesdorff died without a wife, without children, without a will. So by law, his heir was his mother, who still lived in the West Indies. So Folsom takes leave of his job, travels to the West Indies, finds the mother, has her sign a deed to him of all the California property for $75,000, $5,000 down. And just a few years later, that town of San Francisco, which was less than 1,000 people, was 55,000 people. And Folsom sold those lots in San Francisco and much of the American River property for $1.5 million, the equivalent of $250 million today. And that didn't even count the gold that was taken off. So when the mother found out she'd been taken, she sued for fraud. The state of California also sued for some of the property, and the Leidesdorff's heirs on his father's side sued. But after a decade or more of litigation, Folsom and his heirs prevailed, probably because California had passed a law in 1850 which prohibited non-whites from testifying in court against a white man. But if there's any justice in this story, it's divine justice. Because only a short time after he acquired all this wealth, Folsom also died at age 38 of renal failure, probably cirrhosis. But his heirs continued to develop the city of Folsom, There's a major thoroughfare in Sacramento, Folsom Boulevard. There's Folsom Street in San Francisco and many California cities. And so the scavenger, Folsom, is remembered, and the builder, Leidesdorff, is largely forgotten. Let me read you from his obituary in the San Francisco, California Star. Remember, this was written well before all this litigation and attempts by Folsom to be the good guy. Leidesdorff has been in business on this coast, where he has gained a high character for integrity, enterprise, and activity. In private life, he was social, liberal, and hospitable. In his attachments, he was warm, cordial, and confiding even to a fault. He was prosperous, enterprising, and public-spirited. It is not injustice to the living to say that our town has lost its most valuable resident. William Leidesdorff, the builder.